All right, algebra class, you've got a study island assignment coming up that has a lot of content from linear equations and reviews. So now it is time for the epic review. So what I'm going to do here is I've got problems that are very similar to the ones that you're going to see on your study island assignment. There are 10 of them. And I'm just basically going to go through step by step how I would complete the problems so you guys can kind of review and follow along and hopefully prepare yourself for the study island assignment. So the first question is identify the slope and y-intercept of the line 5x minus 10y equals negative 450. And what you notice about this equation is it's in standard form. So basically we're trying to change it from standard form into slope-intercept form. And in order to do that, basically, we just have to solve for y here. And when we solve for y, it will be in slope-intercept form, and we can identify what the slope is and the y-intercept. So in order to do that, the first step is I'm going to subtract 5x from both sides. And that will leave me with negative 10y equals negative 5x minus 450. And I could do negative 450 minus 5x, but I want to try to keep it in the order of y equals mx plus b, so that's why I decided to do it that way. Next step is dividing by negative 10, because that's going to get the y by itself. And I have to divide each of these by negative 10. So for that, negative 5 divided by negative 10, that gives us a positive 1/2. So we get y equals 1/2 x. And then negative 450 divided by negative 10, that gives us another positive. So we're going to have plus, and that is 45. So now we're in slope-intercept form of y equals mx plus b. And the m is the slope. So the slope is 1/2, and the y-intercept is 45. Next question, number 2. The equation of a line in point slope form is y minus 6 equals 3x minus 2. And that x minus 2 is in parentheses. So what is the slope and y-intercept of this line? So this is another one. We have a different form of a linear equation. We have point slope form, and we need to change it into slope-intercept form. So in point slope form, all we really need to do is kind of similar to what we just did, is solve for y. And this one is super easy, honestly. First step is just simplify what we have right here. Use the distributive property. So we get 3x minus 6. And then to get y by itself here, all we need to do is add 6 to both sides. And keeping in mind that we can only add like terms, so I can only add this 6 to the negative 6 there. And we are going to end up with y equals 3x. Because negative 6 plus 6 ends up being 0. If we wanted to, we could include that plus 0, just to kind of keep in mind. Matches up perfectly right here, y equals mx plus b. So our slope ends up being 3, and our y-intercept ends up being 0. Now keep in mind, when we are writing this in slope-intercept form, we won't have to include that 0. We would just have y equals 3x. But to understand what the y-intercept is, we can go ahead and put 0 in there just for that understanding. All right, number 3, a line with a slope of 1 passes through negative 4, negative 5. Write the line of the equation in standard form. And there are multiple ways to do this. The first thing that I noticed, though, is I have a point and I have a slope. And if I have a point and I have a slope, it kind of makes sense to use point slope form, which is y minus y1, which in this case is negative 5. And then it equals m times x minus x1. So our m is a slope, so we can put 1 outside the parentheses. And x1 is negative 4. so x minus negative 4. So subtracting a negative turns into y plus 5 equals 1. And I'm going to go ahead and distribute that 1. We can just remove the parentheses because 1 times anything is itself. So this turns into x plus 4. Now, standard form means we want the x and the y on one side and just a constant on the other side, and a and b are going to be the coefficients. So basically what I want to do is I want to take this x and I want to move it to that side, and I want to take the 5 and I want to move it to that side. So all the variables are on the left and all the constants are on the right. So in order to do that, we're going to go ahead and subtract 5 from 4, and I'm going to go ahead and do this all in just one step here, and subtract x from this side over here. And just to kind of keep it in that ax plus by form, I'm going to put the x first, so negative x plus y equals negative 1. And that is in standard form. We have the x and the y on one side and just a constant on the other side. Our next question, what is the slope of this line? And they give us a graph of this line here. This is a pretty simple one. Kind of back to basics. Remember, slope is simply rise over run. And we just need to identify 2 points that we know. Now, there are 2 obvious points, the x and y intercepts. Those make it very easy, and we could use any of these points really. But to find the rise between these 2 points, to go up basically from 0 on the x-axis to where 9 is on the y-axis. I meant y-axis, not x-axis. That went up 9. And then to go horizontally from negative 9 over to 0 on the x-axis, that is also 9. All right, so our rise is 9 and our run is 9, which that just simplifies to 1. And keep in mind, we try to go left to right when dealing with slope, just like how we read in English. We also look at our graphs from left to right. So that's how we know that we are going up in a positive direction and to the right in a positive direction. So we have a positive 9 over a positive 9. It is okay, I'm going to change colors here, to start at this point, but then you have to realize that you are going down 9 and to the left 9, which would give us 2 negatives, and a negative divided by a negative is also positive 1. And you can also remember that if you're looking at a line from left to right, if it increases, it's a positive slope, and if it decreases, it would be a negative slope. All right, moving on to number 5. What is the equation of a line that passes through 2 points? But what you have to recognize here is it says in point slope form. I've had a few questions over the last week of people doing correct math, but not answering the question as it was. You have to make sure you recognize, do they want point slope form, slope intercept form, or standard form? So point slope form, just kind of a review again, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So we have a point. We have 2 points that we could use, but what we're missing is the slope. So the first thing that we need to do is identify the slope between these 2 points. Looking at rise over run, or our formula, when we have 2 points, the rise is going to be the difference between the y coordinates, and the run is going to be the difference between the x coordinates. So the y coordinates are 8 and 1, and since I used this 8 first for the y, I have to use the x first for, or the 3 first for the x, so I'll have to do 3 minus 8 for that. So 8 minus 1 is 7, 3 minus 8 is negative 5, so we have negative 7/5 for our slope. So we're going to pick either point. It doesn't matter which point we use. I'm going to go ahead and use that 3, 8. So y minus 8 equals negative 7/5 for our slope, and x minus 3. We could have used the other point if we wanted to, and we could have had y minus 1 equals negative 7/5 times x minus 8. That would also be an acceptable answer. Both would be correct. Moving on to number 6. What is the equation of this line? We can't put this into slope-intercept form. It has an undefined slope. We can't put it into standard form. Actually, we could put it into standard form. I take that back. But it has an undefined slope, so we can't put it into slope-intercept form. However, this is a vertical line, and all vertical lines have the same form for the equation, just like all horizontal lines have the same form for the equation. And basically what you have to notice is every single point on here has an x coordinate equal to 0. The first point that it has marked right here is 8, 0. If I'm looking right here, that point is 8, 4. If I look at another point, that point is 8, 8. And what you notice is every single x coordinate, no matter where you are on that line, is going to be equal to 8. It doesn't really matter what the y coordinate is. So the equation for this is x equals 8. And if you kind of think about it going the other way, if we're looking at a horizontal line, let's just pretend that that's at 4.8, we'll say. Every single y value on that line is going to be 4.8. So we would say the equation of a horizontal line like that would be y equals 4.8. So for horizontal lines, the y values are all the same. For vertical lines, the x values are all the same. So respectively, it is y equals a number or x equals a number. Our next question is, what is the equation for a line that passes through the points -4, -3, and 8, 21 in slope-intercept form? So the first key thing that we have to recognize, slope-intercept form. So we're looking for y equals mx plus b. So we need to identify the slope for m and the y-intercept for b. And the way to do this is to find the slope first. And we've looked at this before. We're using y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, and that will tell us what the slope is. So I always like to use the higher y, so 21 is higher than the -3 here. So I'm going to look at 21 minus -3. And then since I used the 21 first for the y, I have to use the 8 first for the x. So 8 minus -4. And that works out because it gives me two positive numbers, which we always like. So 21 minus -3 is like 21 plus 3, so that's 24. 8 minus -4 is like 8 plus 4, so that's 12. So we end up with a slope of 2. So that's the first half. The second part of this, we need to find b, and as we've mentioned before, x and y represent points that are on the line, and we happen to have 2 of them. Once again, I like to go with positive numbers because negative numbers are easily cause mistakes. So I'm going to go with the positive numbers here. So I'm looking at 21 in for my y. We just figured out the m is 2, x is 8, and we're going to use this equation to solve for b. So 2 times 8 is 16. So we simply subtract 16 from both sides and figure out that b is 8. So the two components of this equation that we need the slope of 2 and the y-intercept of 8. So our equation is y equals 2x plus 8. Next question is probably one of the easiest questions on here. It goes right along with what we just did. From y equals mx plus b, our m is 3. So we put in y equals 3x. And the y-intercept is the b is 5. So y equals, I didn't mean to put b in there, I meant to put 5 in there. Y equals 3x plus 5. All right, moving on to number 9. Slightly more confusing, but still going to be pretty simple. A line that passes through the point 6, 1 and has a slope of 7/3. Find the equation in slope-intercept form. So we can do what we just did, but I'm going to use the point slope method here because we have a point and we have a slope. So I'm looking at y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1, where y1 and x1 are coming from the point that we have here, 6, 1. So go ahead and put the information that we have here. So y minus 1 equals 7/3 times x minus 6. All right, and to put this into slope-intercept form, we simply just have to distribute and solve for y here. So y minus 1 equals 7/3 x. And then when I'm looking at 7/3 times 6, I recognize that the 6 and the 3 kind of cancel each other out. 6 divided by 3 is 2, and then 2 times 7 gives us 14. And then the only thing we have to do after that is add 1 to both sides, so we will end up with y equals 7/3 x minus 13 as our equation in slope-intercept. And our final question is, what is the equation in slope-intercept? That should say form there. In slope-intercept form that matches the graph below. So in slope-intercept form, same thing. We need two things. We need to find the slope and we need to find the intercept. And the intercept is actually the easiest part. We know that it's the y-intercept, so that part is 1. So we know that the b equals 1. And then slope, we just have to identify 2 points so we can calculate the rise and the run. So I'm looking at the x-intercept and the y-intercept. So our rise here is just 1, and our run going left to right between them is 3. So our slope is 1/3, our y-intercept is 1, so our equation is y equals 1/3 x plus 1. And that's it. Your assignment is going to be called Linear Equations and Graphs. It's on Study Island. I'm going to treat this one kind of like a test because this is basically wrapping up everything that we've been doing so far with linear equations and graphs. So there are going to be 10 questions on it, but they're going to be worth double the points, so it'll be 20 points altogether. So make sure you watch this video, take some good notes, and as always, I will be available to Zoom Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, during your scheduled class time and during the office hours if you need help. Good luck.